What's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai, starting on here right now in this video. Today I'm bringing a video on Uchuu Sentai Kyuranger episode 18. For those who may be wondering, yes, I have been meaning to post this for a while, but I've been busy because E3 has been going on, so I've been focused a lot more on that video game expo compared to this episode. But I'll tell you this for now, episode 18 was a very good episode. It had, it was a crossover episode with Space Sheriff Gavin and Uchuu Sentai Kyuranger. For those who do not know, Uchuu Sentai Kyuranger was in America was Power Rangers SBD, and Space Sheriff Gavin was something that I don't think America ever got in any form, but still, I wanted to just address that up front for those that are curious. So the episode, basically what happens is that somehow, we don't know exactly how, but Madako ends up stealing the Pixis Kyotama. And as we may remember from the previous episode, Madako is told by Scorpio to take the Kurena Kyotama before so that the Kyurangers can't get it, and that it is a major order. So that's what happens there, and somehow, yeah, she ends up getting it. Eventually, the Kyurangers are hunting down Madako, and Madako's trying to avoid them. Eventually, she goes through a wormhole, and they follow through. Not all of them. About 5 Kyurangers follow through. Which 5? Well, it's Lucky, Naga, Lucky, Naga, Sho, Hami, and Garu. Those 5 follow Madako into a wormhole, bringing them to another universe. This is an alternate universe, one where the world hasn't been taken over, the universe hasn't been taken over by dark matter. So this is pretty interesting, and we'll get into why that is a little bit here. So they eventually end up crash landing down onto their universe's Earth. And while they're on Earth, Madako's ship crash lands, breaks up or whatever, and Madako ends up being greeted by Gavin himself and Geki. And the thing is that Geki ends up being fairly nice to her, thinking that she's a woman, that she's the octopus, a lady in distress. And you have to remember that when it comes to this stuff with Dekaranger and also Gavin, Dekaranger was a show that focused heavily on aliens and humans, coexisting and living as one. So in other words, there's a sense of an alien not being so weird. It's fine if an alien's on Earth because that's just normal. And so it's not like they'll look at an alien and they'll instantly say, oh no, that shouldn't be there. No. It's okay if you're there, but in this case, because of the situation, because of how Madako came across to him as being someone who was, injured, in bad shape or whatever, Gavin ends up protecting her. This eventually leads to, and I forgot to mention this also, Dekared, or Bon, ends up seeing them all coming through the wormhole. And so he notes this, that, some people have trespassed through to their universe. So the thing is that we'll get back to that later, but I wanted to address that just so you guys are aware. So following all this, eventually we have Naga and Lucky, who end up being separated from the other 3, Garu, Sho, and Hami. So those 2 they end up being met by Gavin and Madako. Gavin tries to protect Madako, not realizing that Madako was bad, and they end up getting into a fight, particularly Lucky and Gavin. So this results in some serious battling until one point Madako disappears, and Naga tries to stop the conflict that's going on between Gavin and Lucky. So at one point, so eventually they end up coming to an agreement to stop and talk things out. And then what ends up happening is we see Sho, Hami, and Garo are like watching people at like an amusement park or something like that, just super happy, joyous, nothing wrong. Seems like everything's pretty much hunky-dory, nothing to worry about, the world's beautiful, that kind of situation. And, you know, it seems pretty great. Well, it does. And then eventually we have Yumiko and Sen from Dekaranger, who appear to arrest the three of them. And oddly enough, they actually think at first that Garu is supposed to be their boss, which is Doggy Kruger. They think that it's supposed to be their boss or their boss's brother or cousin or something like that. And they're all like, what? But eventually, they end up getting arrested and brought to, brought to the, to their base of command. And that's where things get interesting with that. But let's go back to the other side, I think. Well, what ends up happening there eventually is they end up being introduced to Doggy Kruger, and that's when Garu says, "Oh, my brother," and he just thinks it because they're both like dogs, so they're just like totally, And people were thinking like, "Oh yeah, Doggy Kruger and what do you call it? Show we're gonna interact in some bigger way." It was really more of a focus on Garu and Doggy Kruger. So it was just kind of funny to see that interaction where they're like, "Oh, my brother," and then it's just like, no, we're just from a different universe and all that kind of stuff. And they eventually explain the fact that Madako's evil and all those different things. And then we go back to Lucky and Naga, who are dealing with Gavin, and they're talking about, and like Gavin feels terrible that he sided with this evil octopus lady, and which is Madako. And so eventually what ends up happening is that he feels bad and he wants to do right, and he explains the fact that he's a police officer, he's supposed to do right by the world. And they say like, what's a police officer? Because from their universe there really wasn't anyone that was a police officer as much. And so he explains the fact that with the space sheriffs, they dealt with all major conflict. And like he basically says, so you're like saviors. And he says, well, I wouldn't necessarily call myself that, but I guess. And there's just this whole entire interaction in the sense is that, like, in their case, their world's already been saved. In the Kyurangers universe, it hasn't. So that's an interesting thing. And so they discuss things a bunch until at one point or another, until at one point we end up seeing Madako using Gavin's ship to try to travel back to the other universe. And the thing is that at that point, Lucky and Naga summon their their Voyagers, and Gavin joins with Lucky to go and try to get back Gavin's ship. And Gavin eventually does get on the ship, gets into a fight with Madako, and then crash lands the ship, which then results in Madako and Gavin getting into a fight. Until at one point or another, we end up having, a couple of exchanges where Lucky and Gavin are doing well, and Naga even mentioned the fact that, like, you guys are like a perfect duo, like, you should just get together and all that kind of stuff, and you're just great. And it's just kind of funny, but it totally works. And so eventually at one point or another, we end up Madako gets shot by Dekarangers. And at that point we end up getting introduced to Dekarangers, obviously, who is Akaza Bonbon. And what ends up happening is that Bon is now part of the fire squad rather than the regular SPD squad that he was part of initially. And so he has a different jacket outfit going on rather than like his standard licensed outfit that he had in the original show. So he looks a lot the same, but with some extra bits of outfit pieces or whatever. And so eventually what ends up happening is that, eventually what happens is that they all they all have to fight Madako, and Madako summons a death worm to also deal with them. So at that point, what happens is that Lucky and Dekarangers end up working together. And it's also funny because Lucky hears from Dekarangers saying, I guess you're the new Sentai team, and the thing is that it's very funny because he's just like, what's that? He doesn't really know, and he's like, I guess you're the rookies now. That means, and so it's just sort of funny because he doesn't really understand it because from their universe, they don't really know of other Sentais, so it's just sort of like, sure, it's not like they have any prior experience with another Sentai team because that never happened. So eventually, what ends up happening is that they continue to fight until eventually Madako gets beaten up, and then the death worm is turned big. And at that point, what happens is that Gavin's ship turns into its dragon form, and then we have Sho appear with Rio Voyager. And we also, I forgot to mention the fact that apparently the other Dekarangers were hoping the other Kyurangers keep the wormhole open, because if they can't keep it open, then the other Kyurangers can't get back to their universe. So there's this whole entire exchange, and them getting along and understanding that Madako was the real cause of all the problems, and Madako was evil and all of that. And so they had always been working together from the very beginning, and that the Dekarangers knew right, but at the same time, we're doing things in a certain way. It's interesting. So eventually, what does end up happening is that Lucky joins with Sho and Gavin on his ship to defeat the Death Worm, and eventually Lucky and Gavin stand on top of Gavin's dragon ship and shake hands, and they say, I guess we'll see each other some other time. It was great being with you or whatever. And there's just this great exchange between the two of them, and in the sense of like they're buds, they're friends, there's a good relationship going on there. And eventually we end up seeing Lucky and everyone back on the Orion celebrating a triumphant victory of battle. And eventually what ends up occurring is that after celebrating and hearing about how the Dekarangers really had saved the world, and so had Gavin, and had kept their world in that universe safe, that gives them that courage, and that gives them that understanding of that they can do it as well. Also, I forgot to mention the fact that they do get back the Pixis Keltama, which is great to note, and so they obviously are not going to look for the Corona Keltama. Now, as far as things go with any other bits for the episode, there is a little clip that shows that I guess Stinger is going back with his cloak and is going to try to attack Scorpio. Now, as far as things go with the preview for episode 19, it does look like episode 19 is going to be pretty interesting. They are going to land on an island or something like that, where they are going to fight Scorpio, and Stinger will return, and it looks like the solar or the sun and moon Keltama that they used 2 episodes ago will be returning again. So that is interesting, and that means that Keltama at least will return. The Pegasus one never returned, and yet it was a similar idea, but this one definitely seems like it's going to have a little bit more significance, which is great, because that means that it's not as limited as the other one had been. So I love to know your guys' opinions of this episode. I know I might have skipped a few little bits here and there, and it's also because there was a bunch of stuff going on, a bunch of characters, and it's cool to see the episode. It was great to see all these different characters returning. Like, I love Dekaranger a lot. I'm not just saying the American one. I'm saying the Japanese one. I love Dekaranger. Like, I really like Dekaranger a lot. It's one of my favorite Japanese seasons. It's not my favorite at all, but it's in my top 10 or so, I would say. Definitely not my favorite Sentai, but a really good one still. And it was also awesome to hear like the different themes from like Gavin and Kyuranger and Dekaranger playing during the fights and all that. Very fun. I'd love to know your guys' opinions below. Please remember to comment, subscribe again, and tell me what you guys think about this episode and anything else having to do with any of these shows, and also what do you guys think for the next episode of Kyuranger. Leave your comments below. Please remember to comment, subscribe, and goodbye, guys.